Kelly here, and I am back with a video for W+9, and today we're going to be using the Biggest Fan stamp set as well as the Artist Palette die. So Valentine's Day is Sunday, and I really wanted to create something that I could send to my crafty friends to let them know how much I admire them, and this Biggest Fan stamp set is totally perfect for it. It has the most adorable sentiments. So I cut out the Artist Palette die using my Cuttlebug just a couple of times, and I am using W+9's white cardstock. It's a really good solid weight, and since I'm going to be doing some different coloring, I made two cards for you today. I wanted something that was going to be sturdy. So on the background of my card, I wanted there to be just a little something. I didn't want to detract away from the main focal point, but in the same token, I didn't want it to just be flat white. So, and please bear with me because my sinuses are acting up today. So I'm using some tumbled glass distress ink, and I'm just rubbing that into the center of my card, and then just kind of blending it out toward the edges, not being very heavy-handed with it because, again, it's just supposed to, you know, kind of be a little pop of color in the background. And in the main, I guess the main center, I don't know, in the center, I'm using Salty Ocean. And then I will go back in with some more tumbled glass and just kind of blend that out and make sure everything's even on the card base. Then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and set it aside, and we're going to get started on coloring these die cuts. So there's a couple of different ways you can color die cuts. Today I'm going to do it with distress inks, and I'm going to do it with Copic markers. There's 100 different ways that you can do this to add dimension. So with distress inks, what I like to do is I like to just, I usually use two colors, sometimes three, and I've done this with stamped images too, where I've cut apart stamped images and colored them this way. But because I wanted my paint tubes to be white, I'm just hitting the edges with the hickory smoke, so they would have a little bit of a gray shadow, much like I would do with my Copics, which you'll see when we get there. And then on the very, very edges, I'm using a very light hand and some black soot just to give it a little bit of dimension. Here I was going basically from my bigger pieces and then pulling out the colors that I wanted. But on the color palette, I knew that I wanted it to go in a rainbow. So that's how I'm selecting which paint pieces I'm pulling out and coloring. And there are two paint splats included in this die cut set, but I didn't use them. So this is Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn. The yellow I used Mustard Seed and Fossilized Amber, and the red was Festive Berries and Aged Mahogany. The blue is Salty Ocean and Blueprint Sketch, and the purple is Wilted Violet and Dusty Concord. You know, don't be afraid to combine whatever you have. You know, I did this with strictly distress inks, but you could do distress inks and then add shading with your Copics, or you could do whatever your whatever ink pads you have, like the Pure Color W+9 Pure Color dye inks. You can color with those, ink blending or just dipping your die cuts right into them. So there's like 100 ways to color them. I don't traditionally do, I guess, individual papers, but again, another option. And then you can add shading with your Copics or shading with your distress inks. All of those things will work. So here I'm just playing around with my layout, seeing what I want to do. I decided to use the large Love You, just the way that it's positioned in the set, and the black W+9 Pure Color ink, which is my favorite ink to stamp my sentiments in. And this is a very large sentiment. I absolutely love it. It's definitely big enough to carry a card if you wanted to do like a watercolor background. Here I decided that I was going to do just the Love You on the front, and then I was going to do the second part of the sentiment on the inside of the card. I'm using Tombow Mono Multi-Glue to put down my pieces, and then those just pop right back in. So it's a little bit of die cutting inlay. And so they'll all fit back in nice and pretty, and then I'll just add my paintbrushes and paint tubes right on top. And I didn't really mess around too much with it. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough room for my paintbrushes to fit, and they weren't going to be like hanging over the edge of my card. Here, adding the label, I decided it would be easier to add the glue to the label in case I needed to like smush it around a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and add that. And I did include the caps to my paint tubes, but if you were using the splats, like you could just instead of using the cap, just add those to the end of the tube, and that would look totally cute. So here I'm using some clear Wink of Stella on the paints, and then on the little label for the paint tube, because everything should have shimmer. I'm going to send something to my crafty friends. I want them to have shimmer. For the metal piece on the paintbrushes, rather than even mess around with trying to color such a small area, I just used a silver jelly roll to fill those in. You could top that with glossy accents, and it would be super shiny and pretty. Here, which I think is probably my favorite part of the card, is the inside sentiment. So the outside says, love you, and then the inside says, in a totally non-creepy way. Like, that's exactly the way I talk. So that is totally floats my boat right there. Such a cute set. Here is the second version of, I'm using the same paper. And then this one we're going to color with Copics. Took me a minute to kind of figure out how I wanted to do this, because normally I brush away from myself, but because the piece was smaller, I was having a hard time doing that. Eventually, I dope out what's going to be comfortable for me. But this is just a very light gray to add some shading to those paint tubes. And because I adhered my die cuts before with my fingers instead of using tweezers or a quick stick or whatever, I have sticky fingers. And you can see that they want to like stick to my fingers. So that was an interesting little challenge there. But again, with the Copics, you can add as much or as little shading as you want. You could just do one coat. It would be, they're going to be pretty either way. This is just something to give you, maybe some ideas of your own to give it a try. I think a lot of times, at least I know for me, when die cuts first became popular, I was like, what am I going to do with that? Like, it's just flat. But it doesn't have to be. You can find a way to make them work for you. And then, you have tons of dimension with your coloring, but also tons of dimension because you're layering paper. So here I went for, I guess, a more traditional color scheme for this one. I'm doing the 2 paint tubes and 1 paintbrush, and I just stuck with the primary colors for those. I don't know why paint palettes make me always just think primary colors. They just do. So I'm just drawing a line down the edge, and I will tell you I'm working on my Ranger craft mat. And you can see I'm coloring right on top of it. You could do this on a scrap piece of paper. It doesn't bother me to do it on my mat. And then it will just wipe up with just some alcohol is what I clean it up with. And I am cleaning in between each color because I don't want to accidentally pick up one. But again, if you were using a scrap piece of paper, that would not be a problem. So I'm doing the same thing that I did with the distressings. Obviously, I'm just doing it with markers. So I'm laying down my lightest color, and then I'm going in with my darker color just for the edges. Here with this yellow piece, because that one little paint piece is so small, I'm not even trying to color it with the lightest color. It wouldn't, there's no point. It would all end up dark anyway. So then, once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and just start the brown, the paint palette, and the brush. I didn't show you all of the colors. I can tell you what I used. So obviously I just showed you the ones for the browns, and for the orange I used Y38 and Y04. For the purple I used V12 and V04, and for the pink I used RV04 and RV09. Did I miss one? I don't think so. So with the palette, I'm making sure that I'm going in the same direction every time. I want my strokes to go in the same direction because it's supposed to look like a wood grain. And so you don't want it to be like all haphazard. Unless you're going for just like a more solid brown look, then that's totally fine. But I wanted there to be some depth, some interest in there. My medium color, I'm just kind of swiping on. I'm being a little more darker around the edges because I feel like, I don't know, it would be darker there. I don't know that that's true, but that's how I view it in my head. And then the darkest color, I just, you saw me, I just did a couple of quick little stripes, nothing fancy. And then I'm going to go over it again with a little more pressure with the lightest color, the E55. And it's almost like putting a varnish on woodwork. Like, it just really makes those other colors blend and pop, and I just love it. So we're going to adhere this basically the same way that we did the first one, except I got so excited about putting the card together, I tried to adhere my paintbrush before I adhered my colors. So don't do that. But thankfully, Tombow Mono Multi Glue doesn't dry right away. It gives you a lot of wiggle room. So I put it down, and then I'm like, hey, wait a minute. There's no colors on there. So just picked it right back up, and it wasn't a problem. Could put my colors in, and then, put that paintbrush back in the exact same spot, and nobody will ever know that I put it on maybe a little too early. So I did have to add more glue though, because it's repositionable when it dries, and I don't want it coming off in the mail when I send it to my crafty friends to tell them how much I love them and that they're awesome. Again, with the labels, I just put the glue on the back of the label. Felt like that was the easiest way to go ahead and apply that. And then I added the yellow tube first. But then after looking at the layout, because I did not plan this one out at all, I was just gluing, I realized that I kind of wanted to tuck the red one underneath it. So again, thank God Tombow Mono Multi Glue is repositionable, because I could just, pick that right back up. It wasn't set, and I wasn't ripping my paper or anything like that. So once that was done, I wanted to do my sentiment, but this time I wanted to stretch it out a little bit. I didn't want them to look exactly the same. So I'm using a Post-it note to just block off that U, and then I'm going to ink up the love so I can stamp it horizontally. So make sure you clean it really, really good in between, because you don't want to stamp like a dirty love on the dirty love. That's hysterical. You don't want to stamp the dirty part of your stamp onto your card. So this was my fault. I adhered everything down, and I didn't push hard enough to get past the dies. So the top didn't really stamp that well. So I just went back in with a journaling pen and, fixed it up. The style of this font is a little more sketchy, so I tried not to fill it in solid. I wanted it to look fluid. And then I love this. Oh, it's so cute. I'm your biggest stalker, and Dawn Karstad stalker and wrote fan. It's totally adorable. So those are the two cards. I hope that you will try coloring your die cuts a little bit differently. And thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys on the next video. Bye.